This is a $185 magnifier, and this is a $670 EOTech G43, the exact lineage of magnifier that secured a $26 million contract with U.S. Special Operations Command. Does that $670 price tag actually buy you a 272% battlefield advantage, or are you just subsidizing a military R&D budget for a capability that you're literally never going to use? Look, if you're a red dot or a holographic sight guy, chances are you've asked yourself this exact question before. The prevailing thought process is that once you clear about $150 on your magnifier, you're hitting the ceiling for glass quality, and everything after that is just a brand tax. Today, I'm gonna show you why that's only about half true and why the real differences between a cheap and an expensive magnifier might not be exactly where you think it is. To do that, I'll be aided by the 4 magnifiers on the table in front of me. These cover pretty much the entire spectrum, with the AT3 Delta starting at around $185, the SIG Romeo Juliet pulling up at $195, the Riton 3 Tactics coming in at $250, and then we're gonna leap up to the big dog and look at the EOTech G43, which comes in right around $670. Now, immediately, everyone wants to talk about glass clarity, distortion, and light transmission through the magnifier, but I think we need to start with the first thing you're gonna notice when you put your magnifier on your rifle, and that's the eye relief in the eye box. When it comes to the feel of your magnifier, you're probably gonna notice the eye relief in the eye box before literally anything else, as long as you don't have a really cheap wobbly mounting system, which we're gonna talk about mounting systems a little bit later. Now, eye relief is a simple linear measurement that determines the ideal distance from the rear lens of the magnifier to your eye, where you can see a full, clear, unvignetted image of whatever it is that you're aiming at. If you're too close to the rear lens, you're gonna have black rings or shadowing around the edges. And if you're too far, the image is gonna shrink, giving you a kind of like a tunnel effect. It's gonna cause you to lose your field of view through the optic. Now, for these optics in front of me, we're actually going to be overlaying the manufacturer's stated eye relief measurement with each optic so that you can see it. And you'll notice that the cheaper optics have a larger eye relief measurement, which should result in a more relaxed head position when you're behind the optic getting ready to shoot. Theoretically, if you're wearing glasses, a helmet, or your stock position isn't perfectly optimized for your individual cheek weld, a longer eye relief should result in a more comfortable shooting position. More on that in about 5 seconds. I want you to imagine that behind this rear lens, there is a 3-dimensional cone or a cylinder floating right behind it. As long as your eye is somewhere inside of that 3-dimensional space, you're gonna get a full usable image through your magnifier. You hear someone say an optic has a generous or a very forgiving eye box, and that means you're gonna be able to get a clear picture through it, even if you're a little sloppy, because that 3D space is a bit larger. Now, if you have a tight eye box, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means that you need to increase your skill level so that you can get a better head placement every single time you get behind the optic. That's why some of the more elite options have the smaller eye box, because they're assuming that you're just gonna be a better shooter if you're using that. To show you what this eye box looks like, we're gonna mount each of these magnifiers behind one of our alpha green dots on a rifle up behind me, and we're gonna crank the brightness on that sucker all the way up. Then we're gonna use a GoPro to show you the eye box in real time, and then we're gonna score each one based on how forgiving it is. Let's run the test, CJ, get over here. All right, excuse the Gen Z mic, we're back from the test. What CJ and I found was the GoPro didn't do the best job of showing the eye box. However, it did get some decent enough footage, but we weren't happy with that. So we also went and I got in front of the magnifier myself so you guys could have a trust me bro moment and I could tell you my own personal opinions. And then we also used a Streamlight flashlight and a fog machine to actually shine light through the prism of the optic to show you where that eye box is, kind of helping show that three-dimensional conical shape that I was talking about, and it's probably going to end up being the thumbnail of this video. Anyways, what you actually wanted to hear is what we found. And what we found was, in fact, that the larger the eye relief, the better the eye box on the Optic was. That said, the Rayton, these guys actually had probably the second best eye box out of all of them. And what we found was that this one let us go the farthest back on the stock and still maintain some semblance of a sight picture. And of course, the overall winner was the AT3 Tactical Delta, which has that 3.19-ish or 3.9-ish. It's got the largest eye relief, so that made it have the most forgiving eye box. It's also the largest overall, so that might be giving it a bit of an advantage as well. So AT3 Tactical Delta, in my opinion, and I think from what we can show, this one has the best eye box. I'm going back over there. So that's the first thing you're actually gonna notice at a glance with your new magnifier. But we haven't talked about the hot button issue yet, the one that really gets Reddit fired up. So let's talk about the part everyone thinks they're paying for with their high-end magnifiers, and that's glass clarity, distortion, and light transmission. This is the big one that everyone is always arguing about on the internet and probably even down in the comment section of this video, because it's supposed to be where our expensive magnifier pulls away from the pack in a huge way. Here's what we're looking for. We got to figure out how sharp the image is in the center of the magnifier, how much does it stay sharp as your eye moves towards the edges of the Optic, how much color fringing or chromatic aberration do you see when you're looking through it? I mean, how much light does the magnifier actually suck up? Or does the image get dark and tinted through the magnifier as a target gets further away? These are the things that we're looking at. Basically, how clean and usable is the picture when you're looking at a target at 100, 200, or even 300, 400, 500 yards. Running all of these optics side by side under the same light conditions, there's going to be a clear hierarchy that we're going to be able to see, even if our lens looking through a lens struggles to paint that picture perfectly here in a YouTube video. But CJ is going to do his best to make that happen. He's kind of a camera lens nerd. Now, the EOTech G43 is hands down the best glass of the four, point blank and period. It's sharper edge to edge, it has less distortion, better color fidelity, and slightly better light transmission than the other three. When you're looking through one of these in person, it feels and looks like a more premium picture. You get less of that subtle fuzz or color smear that some of the cheaper glass can show, especially towards the edges of the image, which is really hard to show through the camera lens, again, because we're talking about a lens looking through a lens. Now, the Rayton 3 Tactics and the Juliet 3 Micro are gonna come in at a very close second place together. In fact, I'd say both are surprisingly good for the amount that you're paying. The SIG's dielectric coated prism does a very nice job with light transmission and color, and the Rayton's HD ED glass is cleaner than I expected at this price point. You're gonna notice a small step down from the EOTech with these two, but for most of us who just don't have EOTech money in the first place, it's not a night and day difference unless you've got a lot of time behind the EOTech platforms and you've downgraded to one of these less expensive optics. Now last, we're gonna look at the AT3 Delta magnifier. The glass here is similar quality to the Tactics and Juliet 3, but this is the one where you're really gonna start to notice a little bit more of the edge softness and a little bit more chromatic aberration compared to the other three. It's still clear enough to identify and hit targets out to a couple hundred yards without any real drama, but it's the most noticeable step down in optic quality of the group of four that we have on the table, especially if you go straight from the G43 from EOTech down to our Delta Optic. Now, while we're giving the EOTech first place in this category, here's the important part that I want you to remember. Our fourth place optic is $185 and our first place optic is $670. You're getting better glass, no question, with the EOTech, but you're not getting 272% better glass. You're getting a noticeable but relatively modest improvement in edge performance, color, and overall cleanliness of the glass. If you're shooting 200 to 300 yards, the mid-tier glass in our $185 price point is already good enough that the extra money you're spending on the EOTech starts getting harder to justify based just on glass quality alone. But on pure optical performance, the G43 wins but I just honestly, guys, I don't think we're seeing the gap that you would expect between this cheap one and this super expensive one on glass quality. But past raw performance, let's talk about the manners of the Optic. I mean, how does it actually live on your rifle every single day when you're carrying one of those around with you everywhere you go? This is another one of those categories where more expensive doesn't always mean more better. In fact, this category right here is one of the ones where some of our cheaper options step up and punch way above their weight class, literally. No, literally, guys, the most expensive option is one of the heaviest magnifiers that we're gonna look at today. It's easy not to think about it while you're strapping your magnifier onto your rifle behind your Optic, but each one of these items is adding weight and bulk towards the rear of your upper receiver, and this can transform how your rifle feels. While I'm talking here, we're overlaying some of the length and weight stats onto the screen so that you can see what these actually measure up to. So 3 of our magnifiers today are technically what's considered a micro magnifier. The intent with these was to minimize the magnifier's footprint and reduce the overall weight of the Optic while making it less in the way when you've got it flipped to the side or depressed on one of your high-speed Unity mounts. With the Riton and the SIG magnifiers, these are pretty much just gonna disappear behind your Optic on your rifle. There's not much weight there. And the G43 is also super compact for what it is, even if it is a bit on the heavier side because of the material choices that EOTech made when they were building these out during the design process. The Delta, however, is a full-size traditional magnifier that you guys are used to from the last 10 years, which puts it at a slight disadvantage. It's not huge, but after you handle these micro magnifiers, you definitely notice and feel the extra length of the Delta on your rifle. In the how does this actually live on my rifle everyday category, our ranking takes a hard flip from the glass section down to our mid-priced options, with the Riton 3 Tactics taking first place at just 7.9 ounces. The SIG Juliet 3 Micro is right behind that, with the EOTech and Delta taking 3rd and 4th place respectively. I really appreciate the size of the Riton behind even our Alpha Green Dot. That said, however, this loops back to what I was saying at the beginning of the video. The real differences between cheap and expensive magnifiers are not always where people think they are. In this category specifically, spending more money gets you a heavier and bulkier Optic, but maybe that's not actually a bad thing if you're looking for something that is bomb-proof. So let's talk about that just for a second real quick. Durability and the build quality and the mounting system, or how this thing actually feels when it's on your rifle. When it comes to an expensive magnifier, or our expensive magnifier in this case, this is supposed to be the segment that justifies the cost the absolute best after glass quality. We're looking at the material components on the Optic itself and how solid the mounting system and flip mechanism feels. We're also looking at the weather sealing, the overall toughness of the Optic, and we've got to talk about the warranties on these as well. Now, this isn't a torture test video, unfortunately. You want to see CJ and I go out to the range and brutalize some Optics? Let me know down in the comments section. CJ and I thoroughly enjoy breaking things. We just didn't have time to do it today because we have to drive about an hour to get to our local range. When you actually handle these Optics though, and you start flipping them, that's when you start to see some of the differences in key places show up. So first is just the overall solidness and sealing of the tubes themselves. All 4 of these Optics legitimately feel tough as nails. They're all aluminum, they're all waterproof to a real standard, and they're all purged so that they don't fog up with temperature changes, allegedly. But the EOTech, in my opinion, feels like it's in a different class here. And I think that comes back to the American manufacturing and EOTech's background as a top military manufacturer. These are nitrogen purged and they're rated to 33 feet of water, and it just has this denser, more refined construction. Now, the other 3 Optics are all IPX7 rated and they're perfectly suited for civilian use, but the G43 just screams that it's ready to end up in a Funker 530 combat footage edit, you know what I mean? So then there's the mounts. The EOTech switch to side mount is battle tested and has a very solid and confidence inspiring lockup. Also has a very good reputation for returning to 0 when you're flipping it back over. The SIG's 90-degree push button mount is also excellent and super clean, but I'm not sure I'm a big fan of having to push a button and then use force to overcome when I could simply just use force to overcome to open and close this optic. It's kind of got a little bit of a Call of Duty vibe, but if you remember Call of Duty, the old ones, the old EOTech mount used to have a push button and then it would flip aside automatically, just like the Riton optic does, which is one of my favorites. Now, going straight to force to overcome, we have the AT3 Tactical Delta. This is ours. Our original version of this was a little shaky, so we iterated on it, and now we've got a really solid ratcheting system that just uses force to overcome to open and close, which is very similar to the style you see on the EOTech. Warranty and country of origin are also important to talk about in this category. 3 of the optics on the table in front of me are all manufactured in China. 1 is manufactured in the United States with global materials. Now, we can debate this to death all day and put ribbons and bows on the subject by saying designed in, engineered in, but at the end of the day, the warranty matters more to me than where it was designed, because I'm the guy spending the cash on the optic and I want to know the company stands behind it regardless of where it's made. Would I prefer to have American manufacturing? Yes. Is that always possible? You see, the way my bank account is set up, it's not. But the SIG, the Riton, and the AT3 all have similar full lifetime warranties on our optics that are transferable, and those mostly apply to manufacturer defects. EOTech, on the other hand, with their US manufacturing, only has a 10-year prestige warranty, which I think could be improved. Hey, EOTech Trigicon runs a lifetime warranty, guys. It's 2026. Let's make that US manufacturing mean something with our warranty. When you put all of that together, EOTech takes this category because of their build quality alone. Categorically speaking, it has the most solid reputation, the most refined mounting system based off of 20 years of field use in war, and it's the only one of these optics that is manufactured here in the United States of America, and that scores them some points in my book. The SIG, the Riton, and the Delta all tie here on an equal point basis, and they're very solid builds for the money that are going to handle just about anything that you or I could throw at them on the range or out of their competition. But if maximum toughness is what you're after and you really want the bomb-proof optic, this is where that $670 price tag finally makes the most sense. All right, let's tally all of this up. We looked at 4 categories today, and there were winners and losers in each of those categories. When it comes to the eye relief and the eye box, our budget bubbas were the winner. The AT3 Delta and the Riton 3 Tactics give you more comfort and a more forgiving head position behind the rifle than either the SIG or the EOTech with their 2.5 inches of eye relief. On glass clarity, distortion, and light transmission, the EOTech was our winner, but not by such a massive margin that the other optics are useless, guys. We had cleaner edges, we had better colors, and more light being sucked into the tube, sure, for a better sight picture, but was it 272% better than all of the optics on this table? I don't think so. When it comes to the size and the weight, once again, our lower cost optics won if all you care about is counting ounces for something like a competition. The Riton 3 Tactics and the Juliet 3 Micro were our lightest and the smallest over all the magnifiers, and that also leads us to our 4th point. When it comes to durability, build quality, and mounting systems, the EOTech was a clear winner by a long shot because the elite tier of end user actually rejects comfort in favor of making an optic built for cool guys that are actually doing cool guy stuff, like kicking in doors and dodging drone blasts in the middle of an active war zone. But look, here's the reality of the situation. Here's the deal. If you want the most comfortable and forgiving magnifier, and you're mostly out on the range shooting steel at around 300 yards, the AT3 Delta, the SIG Juliet 3, and the Riton 3 Tactics make a ton of sense because of their price point. With these, you're getting an excellent set of eye relief, you're getting incredibly usable glass, and you're saving on both optic weight and your bank account. But if you want the best in-class glass on a bomb-proof magnifier meant for going through the fatal funnel, you're gonna pay for that by entering the house that EOTech built. Does a $670 magnifier give you a 270% performance improvement over a $185 one? No, I don't think it does. It gives you slightly better glass and construction for war. If that's what matches how you shoot and you've got the budget to mount that on your rifle, you should 100% do it. But the best magnifier isn't always the most expensive one. It's the one that matches how you actually shoot your rifle based on what you can actually afford so you can get out on the range and start training. Now, if you want to see how CJ and I spend our budgets when we're building a rifle, check out this playlist right here where we take $600, build one rifle, and then progressively add to that budget until we get all the way to $2,500. We'll see you over there. The Sig Juliet Micro.
That's the whole thing? Was slightly in frame.
Son of a- is the blessed. It starts.
What?
Bow. Ooh.
Include that.
Don't include that.